Yeah, the past, yeah. People, right? Have their own strength. So this kind of things, someone that typical. Yeah. So if you look at the rules of what the boss is always right. If the boss wrong, then they have to put rule number one. So when these kind of people become our boss, it's quite difficult to how to say how to deal with this because they won't accept some people's ideas, some people's arguments. So because
Bluetooth device is connected successfully.
and characteristic where some people are strong
Sudah terlihat?
Halo, selamat pagi. Morning. Pukul 9 pagi Jakarta, betul lah? Wan?
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. Yeah. Is it 10 o'clock? Is it I'm the right session now, or I go to the wrong one? Is it?
I think
oh
for
my
this
God.
session, the speaker
Is
is Colonel Amiruddin bin
All
Datuk
right. Okay.
Sulaiman.
Okay. Maybe I go to the wrong one. Okay. I will move to another one.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes,
Okay.
I'm
So,
so sorry.
okay. Okay. No problem. See you again. Right. Okay.
Ini aja.
Tak boleh Pak Putri, salah kamar.
Kecil. Hello, good morning, sir.
Good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Sorry,
Walaikum-
a bit early. I just want to practice on how to upload my slide on Zoom.
How to share screen your slide, isn't it?
Yeah, hang on, hang on. All right. Usually there is somewhere a key somewhere that says I can upload my slides, but is it share? Okay, all right, hang on. Hang on, all right.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Hang on, hang on. All right. All right. Hang on, I'm trying to share my slide.
Yes, sir. Please take your time, sir.
All right.
Okay, we already able to see your slide, sir.
Hang on, hang on. I'm trying to play my slide. Okay, can you all see my slide?
Yes, sir.
All right, but I can't see you all. Never mind. So we still have time, not a problem.
Yeah, it's 1
I
minute
just
more.
want to test. I just want to test these slides. Is you are able to see it? Is my voice clear?
Yeah, it's clear, sir.
All right then. All right. So you are the moderator, KL Herdayatama.
Yes, I am, sir. I'm the moderator for this morning discussion session.
Fine. How do I address you? Herdayatama or what?
You can call me Herda, sir.
Herda. All right.
Actually, sir, before we start the whole activity today, I want to ask you about today's agenda. So today's is Friday. I guess we will have Friday prayer, sir. Do you want us to finish it earlier, or maybe we just carry out the activity according to the schedule, sir?
Hang on. I have some audio. What you call this problem? Now I'll get back to you in a bit. Hang on.
Okay, sir.
You try again, Herda. What were you saying? Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, sir.
So it's not that loud. All right, hang on. I'll come back to you. Okay, I need to check back my audio. Is my voice clear? You can hear me well?
Yeah, it's clear, sir.
All right, but I can only softly hear you. Hang on a minute. Okay, I need to rectify the part.
Yes, okay, sir.
Okay, I think this is much clearer.
How about now, sir? Can you hear me clearly, sir?
Yeah, much better. Hang on.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Fine. All right then. We have 10 more minutes. Is there anything? I think before we start, this is a what you call this a blessed Friday. So before we start with my lecture, do you mind if I say a prayer?
Yes, okay, sir.
Okay. Before that.
Actually, before the discussion session, they will be opening from MC, sir.
Okay, fine. So I'll do the prayer after the opening by the MC.
Yes, sir.
Just let me know when everybody is ready, and I will start with the lecture.
Yes, sir.
All right, then.
My question earlier, sir, about the Friday prayer. Do you want us to finish this discussion session earlier, or maybe just carry out the activity according to the schedule, sir?
We follow to the schedule unless you need to finish off early, because I'm in Malaysia. I'm working from home, so we are not allowed to pray at the mosque.
Oh, I see, sir.
So we only conduct our Friday prayers for Zuhur prayers.
Okay, sir. Thank you for the info, sir.
No problem. So what about you in Indonesia?
It's okay,
Are you able to go to the mosque and pray?
In Jakarta, actually, according to government policy, we are not allowed to go to the mosque, sir.
So similar
same
in
happening here.
So what about all of you there, and where at the university, National Indonesia Defense University, where you are? Is everything in containable as far as the COVID-19 pandemic is concerned?
We are in our own location. I mean, we are in our own area, sir. We don't go to the college. We don't go to the campus right now.
I see. Good, good. So have you all been vaccinated yet with the vaccine?
Yes, some of us, especially those in Jakarta, are vaccinated, but some of us aren't
Still
haven't got the
waiting for your
vaccine.
turn.
Yes,
Okay, fine. It's similar in Malaysia. So let's pray together that both our countries and all the other countries in the region will start to be vaccinated as early as possible so that we all can overcome this terrible pandemic COVID-19, which is affecting many lives, right?
yes,
All
that's true.
over in this region, both our countries, this region, and over the world. And it's a pity actually to see many, many people are suffering,
Yeah,
and we should help them, right?
yes,
For those of us who are in a comfort zone, right, to assist them whenever we can, okay?
yes, sir.
And always be grateful that we are still able to enjoy some of the little things in life, all right?
Yes, sir. True.
Okay, Honda, no problem. I'll wait. We'll wait for your cue when to start the lecture. Not a problem at all.
Yes, okay, sir. We will wait for 5 minutes more.
No problem. No problem.
Yes.
Good morning, all participants. May I have your attention? We are about to begin our agenda today. So please find a perfect seat, turn on your camera, and make yourself comfortable. Thank you.
So can we start the lecture, or is there anything else?
Sir, there will be an opening from MC first, sir.
Oh, okay.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Best wishes for all of us. Salam, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan, Salam Bela Negara. The Honorable the Dean of Faculty of Defense Management, Republik Indonesia Defense University, Rear Admiral Dr. Kasih Prihantoro. The Honorable the Dean of Defense Study and Management Faculty of National Defense University of Malaysia, Lieutenant Colonel Professor Madya Arifin bin Ismail. The Honorable Vice Dean of the Faculty of Defense Management, Republik Indonesia Defense University, Air Force Marshal Anton Iman Santosa. Honorable speakers and moderator from National Defense University of Malaysia and Republik Indonesia Defense University. Honorable lecturer, staff, and student of Defense Management Study Program, Republik Indonesia Defense University and Malaysia National Defense University, and all participants. First of all, let us invite our praise and gratitude Almighty because of His blessing we can gather together this morning at the Overseas Study, Faculty of Defense Management, Republik Indonesia Defense University under the theme Management of National Resources for Defense and Security. The topic for this opportunity is Equipment Acquisition for Defense. I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you. We appreciate the time that we spent for today, and I wish the success for this session of overseas study which is online. To begin the session, we would like to inform our today agenda. First, opening by MC. Second, presentation and Q&A guide moderator. Third, handover certificate. Fourth, photo session, and the last, closing. Honorable participant, let us proceed to our main agenda. The presentation session from Colonel Amaruddin bin Dato Sulaiman and fourth session would be guided by moderator Mr. Ketut Laksmi Herdayatama. Please welcome Colonel Amaruddin bin Dato Sulaiman and Mr. Ketut Laksmi Herdayatama. Before we begin, we would like to read the curriculum vitae of today's moderator. Mr. Herdayatama, Bachelor of Engineering, was born in Tambalang on February 29, 1996. He studied at the Bandung Institute of Technology, majoring mining engineering study program. Currently, he is continuing his postgraduate education at the Republik Indonesia Defense University in Defense Management Study Program. He was active in several organizations during his study. He was Commander of Menwa Battalion 1, the Bandung Institute of Technology, Commander of Basic Military Education Training, and was active in student association in the Mining Engineering Study Program of the Bandung Institute of Technology. He was also active in the National Defense Training Program, such as a Basic Military Education Training and Youth Development and Commander course. Let us begin to move it to the moderator. The floor is yours.
Okay, first of all, I would like to say thank you to the Master of Ceremony, Ms. Yesi, for introducing me and leading this discussion session. The Honorable Dean of Defense Management Faculty, Republik Indonesia Defense University, Rear Admiral Dr. Kasih Prihantoro, the Dean of Defense Studies and Management Faculty, National Defense University of Malaysia, Lieutenant Colonel Professor Madya Arifin bin Ismail, the Vice Dean of Defense Management Faculty, Republik Indonesia Defense University, Air Force Marshal Anton Imam Santosa, Secretary of Defense Management Study Program, Republik Indonesia Defense University, Colonel Dr. Insinyur Ari Sarjito, STMAP IPU CIQR, our lecturer for this morning session from National Defense University of Malaysia, Colonel Amiruddin bin Dato Sulaiman, and all lecturers, staffs, and students of Defense Management Study Program and National Defense University of Malaysia. Good morning. In this occasion, I would like to give especially my big gratitude to our lecturer today, Mr. Amiruddin, for sparing his time and to give lecture and to share knowledge for all of us here. For information, Mr. Amiruddin, today is our last day in overseas study of defense management faculty. From the previous session, we learned about defense policy of Malaysia, natural resources management for defense, human resources for defense, human security, and yesterday we learned about management industry development, which of course still related to our main theme, management national resources for defense and security.
Arizona, Hawaii.
Today's session will be divided into three parts. The first is a lecture from Colonel Amiruddin bin Dato Sulaiman from NDU of Malaysia, and then followed by question and answer session. And last, before I close this session, I will give a chance for the speaker to give a closing statement. For students during the presentation who want to ask question, please write down your question in the chat box below. Okay, before we go to the main agenda of this morning session, let me introduce our lecturer today from his curriculum vitae. Colonel Amiruddin bin Dato Sulaiman is a senior lecturer at National Defense University of Malaysia from 2017 until present. In 1980, he finished his study in Royal Military College and took advanced level for academic qualification or A level at Derby College of Further Education in England. He got his bachelor degree in accountancy studies at Polytechnic Huddersfield in UK. In 1997, he finished his master degree in defense studies at the University of Canberra, Australia. He also got his master of social science in defense studies at University Kebangsaan Malaysia. Besides an academic, Mr. Amiruddin also qualified in many other fields, such as qualified teacher in swimming, Army Command and Staff College, basic and advanced internal auditor for cooperatives, balance co-op practitioner, and many others. About working experience, from 1985 until today, he has a lot of working experience in various positions and institution in military especially. From finance officer, platoon commander, instructor, adjutant, lecturer, commanding officer, commandant, and right before he joined National Defense University of Malaysia, he was a director of strategic management in Malaysia Armed Force Headquarters. He is also academic advisor, student supervisor, examiners, researcher, and a lecturer in several subjects, such as military history, naval and maritime strategy, blue ocean strategy and total defense, strategic studies, and military relation management. He received several honors and awards at the federal level to the United Nations level. There are 10 honors and awards from 1990 until 2014. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, about 2 hours until 11:30, we'll discuss a topic about equipment acquisition for defense. And now, without further ado, here our lecture from National Defense University of Malaysia, Mr. Amiruddin, who will deliver a lecture for about 60 minutes. Please, for Colonel Amiruddin bin Dato Sulaiman, you may have the floor. Excuse me, mister, you haven't unmuted your mic, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, it's clear, sir.
All right. So thank you very much, Sharda, for the long introduction. Okay. It should be a short and sharp one, but nevertheless, thank you very much. Okay. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a Friday. So it's a blessed Friday for the Muslims. So I do not know whether there are students who are non-Muslims, but if they are, I hope you can allow me to say a prayer before we start with the lecture, so that we all be blessed with knowledge and experiences after we end this lecture today. So allow me, right? So we start with the prayer. Muhammadin sallallahu alaihi wasallam wa alihi al-kirami wa ashabi al-izami lahum min al-fatiha. Alhamdulillah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافي مزيدا يا ربنا لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك والعظيم سلطانك اللهم إني أسألك بنور وجه الله العظيم الذي معك عرش الله العظيم وقامت به علم الله العظيم أن تصلي على مولانا محمد في القدر العظيم وعلى آل نبي الله العظيم بقدر عظمة ذات الله العظيم في كل لمحة ونفس ونلمة في علم الله العظيم صلاة دائمة بدوام الله العظيم تقديما لحقك يا مولانا يا محمد يا ذا الحقوق العظيم وسلم عليه وعلى آله مثل ذلك واجمع بيني وبينه كما جمعت بينه هو النفس ظاهرا وباطنا قدرة ومناما واجعله يا ربي روحا لذاته من جميع الوجوه في الدنيا قبل الآخرة يا عزيز ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم. All right, Alhamdulillah. So, can somebody help me, Hilda, to show my slides?
Yes, sir. So, do you want us to share the slide from here, sir?
If you don't mind, because I already...
Yeah. It's okay, sir.
Fine.
The operator, please.
All right. So the topic today, this morning, is equipment acquisitions for defense. All right. So next slide, please. So that is the outline for today. But I just need to inform you that there will be 2 lectures, okay, within this time period, right? So we'll have a break for about 10 minutes after my first lecture. And then I hope Herda can assist me to upload the second slide, which is a case study on defense acquisition by Malaysia. All right. So next slide, please. Right. So what is defense, right? For military acquisitions. Okay. So that's the question. Next slide, please. So it is a bureaucratic management and procurement process dealing with a nation investment in technologies, programs, and product support necessary to achieve the national security strategy that support its armed forces. Okay. So the objective of defense acquisition is actually to acquire products satisfying specific needs and provide measurable improvement to mission capability at a fair and reasonable price, right? So this is a definition from the US Defense Department. Okay, next slide. So it is a process. Why it is bureaucratic? Because there are many levels. So whether you like it or not, we have to deal one with the Ministry of Defense, our civilian partners, and then another we have the Armed Forces organization. And both of these organizations have different levels of acquisitions processes. So it is actually a process. So involving multiple agencies, as I mentioned just now, and also the private sector. So whether you like it or not, right? Countries like Malaysia and Indonesia, despite having our own defense industry, right, we still need to purchase other equipments from other countries, right? Because we are not able to produce it. So that's why we also collaborate not only within our defense industry for our defense equipment requirements, but also other private industries from overseas. Okay. So what is it about? It is about political leadership. So at that level, at the highest level of the country, if there is a white paper, so Malaysia just announced its white paper at the end of 2019. So it provides what is a defense white paper. It is a general paper, a policy paper, informing the public what are the requirements of security and defense. Like I said, from the Malaysian experience, is from the defense, our defense white paper, is what are we facing the threats, the future threats of the country, and how do we actually achieve to contain it, right? And also the development of the Malaysian armed forces. So when we look back at the geostrategic situation, not only in Malaysia, but also in the region and the world, so how do we accustom ourselves, right, to those new and geostrategic environment? So do you all understand what when I say about geostrategic situation? Any comeback? No problem, you can understand that? Okay, good. So after the political leadership, the defense white paper and the defense policies, right, it include other departments as well. So in Malaysia, it involves the defense and finance and other relevant agencies. And obviously the armed forces and also the private sector, including companies that sells the equipment with related infrastructures, facilities, and human resource development. Next slide, please. Right. So, like I mentioned just now, what are the elements involved? One is the defense white paper or the national defense policy. So some countries may not have a defense white paper, but they have a national defense policy. And then you have defense planning and development. You need to have plans, right? And then you need to have the development, okay? And then obviously, once you have that, right, it's about the defense acquisitions. Then only once you have determined your plan and the development, then you make the acquisitions, all right? So those are the elements involved in defense equipment acquisitions. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the geostrategic security environment dynamics. So when I say dynamics is that it is an ever-changing environment. It is not the same. Example, at one time, countries in this region was fighting insurgencies, right? Guerrilla warfare. But in the early 2000, we started to move on to terrorism and so on, okay? So the environment is changing. The other things is that it's about technology. Military technology or even civilian technology keeps changing, okay? So the dynamics of the security environment is like, has a life of its own. So it continues to develop over time. And then countries, they do trade, right? So trading, we are getting more closely linked through economic activities and partnerships. Right. One time, China was considered just a developing country, but now China is perceived as a major economic power, overtaking Japan in the #2 spot. And it is expected by 2030, 2040, China could be the major economic power overtaking the United States. We do not know. We'll look into when it comes later on, we'll see. Okay. Then obviously the depletion of natural resources. Whether you like it or not, the natural resources that we have, right, is depleting. Why? The human population is increasing, and then you have what you call the middle income earners, the increasing numbers of middle income earners, particularly in China. So they have a lot of what you call this market demand for products and so on. Right? So there is it is difficult to replace all these natural resources. So there is a depletion. And that's why now governments all over the world are concerned about the weather, the environment, right? And then also about the ecological damage done by pollution and so on, right? And how to recycle the natural resources that we have become products, and we recycle it to become other products and so on. And then you have the competition among the major powers, right? So we have the rhetoric between China and the US now. So it is becoming previously during the G7 leaders meeting in Cornwall, United Kingdom. So they're making China, looking at China now as a competitor, as an opponent, right? So it's becoming something like an East-West competition, similar to the Cold War, but in different circumstances and situations. Okay, so there is a worrying trend for small countries like Malaysia. Okay, so proliferation of weapons of mass destruction in the WMD not only involve chemical, but also biological, and then radiological, nuclear, and also high-yield explosive threats. So at one time, it was just NBC, nuclear, biological, and chemical. But look at the development now. You have radiology and high-yield explosives, right? And biological. So things are changing, and the security environment is changing. So we need to keep ourselves with the development, and we keep pace with the development of all these things around us. Not just look at what we are, the comfort of our home or our dorm or universities, but look at the surroundings and how do we actually fit in all this changing situation. All right. Next slide, please. And then you have the Middle East instability. Now, when Donald Trump administration recognized that Jerusalem was the capital for Israel, so there was a big of what you call this criticism by most, if not all, of the Muslim countries and even the developed countries on that move, because it provides instability in that. It can further provide instability in that region, right? So you look at Palestine now, right? It is ever decreasing, and the amount of space that they have, land that they have, is ever decreasing, and Israel land is ever increasing. So we do not know how those things is going to be resolved. It is very difficult, right? When there's a lot of major powers involvement in that region. So I will not dwell on that further, okay? So because I'm not an expert in Middle East issues. And then you have the problem with the, not a problem, the issue on militarization in the South China Sea. So a lot of the features in the South China Sea is turned into military installations or placements. Right? So it's a worrying trend for countries in this Southeast Asian region. And then you have terrorism, rogue states and individuals. Rogue states like North Korea. And then individuals like probably the president or the secretary general of North Korea that can be considered as individuals, right? So these are issues that relates to threats, not only to the region, but the world, okay? And then you have these non-traditional threats, right? Human trafficking, drugs, weapons, smuggling, piracy, kidnap for ransom, you name it, cross-border crimes, okay? So countries are facing a changing environments of threat, and they need to address those threats very, very seriously. So a good example is during this pandemic COVID-19, like in Malaysia. So we're trying to control the number or the rise in the number of cases by ensuring that our borders, both land, maritime and air borders, are safe from illegal immigrants, which may bring new cases of COVID-19 into the country. Okay, so like I said, the non-traditional threats is changing over time. So we need to address it very, very seriously. And then environment. So as I mentioned earlier, whether you like it or not, it concerns about environment, natural disasters, climate change, environmental hazards. So it is said that by a report that I read somewhere that low-lying countries like the Maldives, right, and also some parts of Malaysia, like for example, Kota Baru, even in certain parts of Malaysia near the South China Sea and the Straits of Malacca, in several decades' time, right, they will face a level of seawater that will collapse the whole city or towns. So those are the things which are changing. Right. Next slide, please. Right. So the Defense White Paper, the National Defense Policy, is the formulation of national security strategies. So when you have a national policy, which is very general, so you need to come down to expand it further into more specifics. So you formulate what are, based on the Defense White Paper, what are the national security strategies? Okay, so understanding the current and future dynamics of the geostrategic security environment, as I mentioned earlier, determining national preparedness in facing challenges I've mentioned just now, right? Looking at the threats the country is facing and how do we overcome it with our limited resources. And then obviously the future development of the security forces. And then the national resource allocations for security and defense purposes, a percentage of gross domestic product. So since the introduction of the Malaysian Defense White Paper, so it was stated that the national defense budget will be a certain percentage of the gross domestic product. All right, and obviously the development of the national defense industry. Why? So it's all about self-sufficiency. So every country tries to do that, but it is done, right, in a way that through knowledge exchange, technical, or what you call these technology exchange and so on, right, to revive or even sustain the defense industry. But there are a lot of challenges. I think Indonesia had a very sustainable development of its defense industry. So I think the last one I heard was that you were capable of building your own submarines. Okay. So those are some of the examples for the development of the national defense industry. Next slide, please. Right. So you go one level down, So the armed forces security and defense policy. So the people, the staff officers and the commanders in the armed forces will now look at the security and defense policy from the national defense, from the defense white paper, right? So how does the armed forces contribute towards what is presented in the national defense white paper? So how, within our limited resources, how do we undertake it, right? And then look at, review the strategic long-term development plan during economic contraction and also expansion. So economic robustness and recessions. So sometimes people fail to address when you develop the armed forces, taking into account recessions. They think that the country is experiencing economic expansion all the time. So if you look at the world economic downturns and upturns, right? So there is approximately every 10 years, and there will be an economic downturn. So you need to cater for that when you plan for your armed forces development, okay? Then obviously the force structure. So do you need more men or do you need less men? So how do you balance that with technology, right? So at one time, not at one time, now what we did in Malaysia, our experience is that we further increased the skills of our soldiers. So they are able to do multiple skills, multiple tasks, instead of just one task. So it becomes smaller, right? So you, from that savings, now you can acquire equipment, right? Critical equipment for the armed forces. Then obviously sustaining current capabilities for military operations, training and logistics. So with the amount of money that we have, besides the development of the armed forces, we also need to sustain our operations. What does operations mean? That means ensuring the security, the sovereignty of the country is safeguarded, particularly along the borders, right? Both land, maritime and air borders, right? But at the same time, also there must be a continuous training, improving the skills of the soldiers, right? And obviously logistics, the support that is required to conduct the operations and training. Next slide, please. So you need to prioritize acquisition for future development. So when I say prioritize, right, we're not like America. So they are able to develop, right? They do research and develop new weapons for the future war. But for Malaysia, we're only a small country, right? We can't even buy an advanced equipment with in the millions and the billions of dollars, US dollars, right, at one go. So we need to spread it over time, which is called the Malaysian 5-year plan. So in fact, acquisition sometimes doesn't take 1 or 2 months. It takes several years. For example, the Malaysian submarines, it took about 5 years to complete. From the moment the agreement was signed, the contract was signed, until it's operationalized in the Malaysian armed forces. And then interoperability. So that means whatever equipment that you acquire, right, you're able to operate with the Navy and also the Air Force. Okay, so those are some of the things that you need to take into account. And then obviously the development of the defense industry. So in what areas do we are able to further enhance and develop our defense industry within the capacity that we have, right? So unlike the big countries like China, US, we cannot do that. So what Malaysia does is we do it within their capacity, at least to achieve a certain extent of self-sufficiency. We cannot have what you call this a full self-sufficiency like those countries, developed countries that have their defense industrial complex, right? So Malaysia do not have that. And then cost effectiveness of new capabilities. That means looking at their life cycle how long did they last, right? And then possible cost overruns. So it means that every equipment, for example, when you buy a car, right, after 5 years, when you use the car, it is considered uneconomical. Why? By then, by the 5th year, right, you'll be experiencing a lot of repairs for the car. So similarly with military equipment, so it have a lifespan. So after a certain years, right, it will become uneconomical. Because why? Because the parts are not easy to get. It's not easy to maintain it, right? It will cost a lot more money and so on. So it's best to buy new equipment, new capabilities, right? So that's life. You can't run away from it. Next slide, please. So the crux of the matter now is the defense acquisition. Next slide, please. So there are 5 elements or 5 factors. One is relevancy. Second is affordability. And then resilience, sustainability, and transparency. Next slide, please. So what do I mean by relevancy? So it must be relevant in the sense that capabilities requirement is what the country wants, right? So when the security dynamics, the strategic security dynamics and geostrategic environment is becoming more complex and uncertain, so the capabilities that is to be acquired must meet future national security and defense requirements. Easy to say, but not easy to be done. Why? Like I said, technology is always changing. Now, let's take a good example, right? In the development of missiles. So previously, during the Cold War, you look at nuclear missiles and so on, right? The normal conventional missiles. But over time now, Russia and China have hypervelocity missiles that can defeat, right, defenses of their opponents. So, like I said, technology is changing over time, and the way the future war is going to be fought is going to be at the push of a button, right? So things are changing very, very fast, right? And the future is very scary, actually, if you think about it, right? So besides acquiring, you also need to anticipate what are the training requirements with the introduction of new capabilities. So there must be a learning of new skill set, right? So you have acquired previous skills, but maybe you need further requirements, or you need to change the whole set, yeah, according to the equipment acquired. And then they anticipate the construction of new infrastructures and facilities. So obviously, for example, if you don't have a submarine, suddenly you acquire a submarine, where do you put it? So you need the infrastructure and the facilities and the human resource behind it, right? So there's a saying that in the military, you may have the platform or the equipment or the weapon by itself, but it only works, right, if there's a human behind it, okay? So anticipate the human resource required, okay? And then you participate defense industry players in the acquisition of those assets and or the maintenance or sustainability of it, right? So that it can operate at a much longer period of time, okay? And then obviously, again, interoperability among the services. So when you acquire the equipment, right, it must be able to operate interoperability between, say, for example, if the Army acquires the equipment, it can also interoperate with the Navy and the Air Force. A good example is during joint exercises, when it involves the 3 services. Okay, that's what interoperability means. Next slide, please. And then obviously affordability. So Malaysia, in my research, which I have done, Malaysia is a country where socio-economic development is a priority. Defense comes later, right? But it doesn't mean that Malaysia forfeit its security development or security issues, right? So there is even the priority is looking at socio-economic development, but defense and security matters are not put aside. It is looked into so that to ensure that the sovereignty and the security of the country is contained properly, right? So it's about resources again. Resources are limited. So how do we use efficiently the resources that we have? Times of economic robustness and recession, which I've already mentioned earlier. And then it's about making hard choices. So when you prioritize your acquisition, right? Sometimes you have to forego other things. Okay, so you need to buy this equipment first. So you have to forego other things. When you forego other equipment, that capability is not acquired. How does that affect your security and defense? So those are some of the hard choices that military leaders and also their masters need to look into and decide. It's not easy. And then the cost projection, the life cycle, the maintenance, right? Training of the man, continuous training and so on. Because why? Over time, people come in and people retire or leave the service to go elsewhere and so on. And then the possible increase in fuel and lubricant prices. So we look for the past couple of weeks, the price of fuel is increasing over 70 US dollars per barrel, and is projected to achieve about 100 US dollar per barrel after the post-pandemic situation. That is just a prediction by the financial and also the energy specialists in the West. And then unforeseen or unplanned repairs and replacement. So despite efforts being made, right, to plan for the equipment that you have acquired, right, for repairs and replacement, sometimes things happens out of your planning requirement. Yeah? For example, mishaps might happen. Okay, so how do you cater for that? So it's not easy. And then avoid undue cost overrun. So like I said, resources are very scarce, especially money, right? So in the military, right? So in Malaysia, the civilians control the money, right? So the military just plan and use that money as efficiently as possible. So the way we plan it, right? We don't have any cost overruns unless it can be avoided. A good example is that when you need to upgrade, right, the lifespan of a equipment. So let's say now the equipment is lifespan is 10 years, but you need to upgrade it because the country do not have the resources or the finance to buy new equipment. So it needs to be upgraded, which is more economical, to another 5 more years. And that's what happens, right? So in my studies, right, so the first 5 member countries, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand, and Philippines, right? In my research, besides acquiring new equipment, right, they also upgrade, and also sometimes they're able to be given equipment by other countries like the United States, Germany, UK, you name it. Yeah? Some of the armed forces, they are given the equipment by those developed countries. Next slide, please. So resilience. So when you acquire equipment, it must be resilient. So you need to adapt to the change quickly, responsively, and timely. Easy to say, but not easy to be done. Okay. So due to the complex and uncertain future, it's not easy to really prepare for any future eventualities. Now, the late researcher, I can't recall his name, Collins, I think if I'm not mistaken, Colin Gray, he mentioned that you may use historical data to predict the future, right? But in actual fact, whatever you do, the future is still uncertain. You cannot predict it precisely. Okay, so you need to prepare for that. It's not easy. It's always a challenge. So you can only do your best. And then you have to prepare skilled practitioners that have capability resilience. So you must have experts in that defense equipment, how to operate it in peacetime, how to operate it in wartime. So and then the continuity of it. So you need to have the younger people that have the skills and the expertise as that of their older generation. So you need to pass on that knowledge to the younger generation so that there is a continuity and sustainability of knowledge and experience. And most importantly, the skills that is needed to sustain and maintain the equipment. And finally, the risk, right? Considering sustainable principles, it may not guarantee the resulting capabilities will be resilient. Now, despite the effort being made, we are all human beings, all right? So sometimes when you have done your best, things still happen. So you can't avoid it, right? So you just have to prepare for it, right? So it's not easy. So it's very challenging. But for those professionals, like in the military, from my experience, right, whatever resulting capabilities that we have, we always overcome it and make sure that it is operational. Okay, so we do it to the best of our ability, and it can be done. Okay, next slide, please. Sustainability. So it's about sustaining the equipment. So it is complex and uncertain, again, because of the security environment. And then, like I mentioned earlier, new developments in warfare, military technologies. I've already mentioned that. Sustaining the unsustainable. What do you mean by that? Sometimes, right, you find challenges, right, of the equipment which is unsustainable. How do you do that? You through adaptation. So, for example, the availability of fuel is a limited resource. So the alternative is going green. So those some of the adaptations that you need to undergo. And then preparation of critical resources could result in unsustainability. Now, for example, rare earth materials. So China now is the leading country in producing rare earth materials. So whether you like it or not, right, these materials are being used in all the equipment, military technologies, and also our daily lives in our handphones, fridges, cars, you name it. Okay. So need for careful considerations for the relevant sustainability risks involved and to manage it the best possible way. So like I said, so you need to consider, right, the sustainability, the risk involved, and how to possibly manage it. So like I said, you can only plan according to the capacity or capability that you have. So whatever happens next, you need to adapt. So one other way to overcome that is to have your own R&D. That's why it's very important to have skilled personnel so that they can look at alternative methods on how to overcome the unsustainability measures or risk. Okay, next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Rifa, slide.
Melia, are you still with us? I think there's a problem with the student who share screen the presentation, sir. Please wait a moment. I will ask for another student to help us. Okay.
Then transparency. So again, whether you like it or not, equipment involve money. So they need to be transparent. So how do you make it accountable? You have audits. So you have internal audits, you have external audits or independent audits. From the Malaysian experience is that we have our own internal audits department. So we audit all the transactions in the Ministry of Defense, both what the civilian make and also the military. And then you have the independent, we have the National Audit Department, right? So they go everywhere and audit whatever is already been audited, right? So to ensure that the expenditures, right, are justified. And then it contributes towards using use of SCAR nationals resources. Okay, that is transparency. That's right. So to conclude, right, defense acquisition is actually a process of continuity and relevancy from the highest echelons of government, right, those to who make the final decisions, right, and also the consequent life cycle operational deployment. And then it's about relevancy, about affordability and transparency, as I mentioned. And obviously, there are risks and challenges involved. And due consideration are needed to ensure that any defense acquisitions is made value for public money well spent. All right. So I think we'll take a 5-minute break, and then I'll continue with my next lecture. Okay. Before we go for the Q&A. Herder,
Okay,
how
sir.
much time do I have?
You still have about 20 minutes, sir. Is that
Okay.
enough?
I think it should be enough. I'll go
Okay,
to the
sir.
next slide. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Hang on.
Okay, for our participant, you may have a break for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Herda, if you are still around, could you help me out? Could you use my second slide and post it in the Zoom?
Oh, sure, sir.
Okay,
Wait
okay.
a moment.
Because I'm not quite an expert in all these applications. Fine. That'll be fine. Okay. So we still have about 4 minutes. No worries. All right. We'll wait for give a break for the others to come back. Let me know when it's time. Okay.
Yes, sir. Excuse me, sir. The break time is over. You may continue when you're ready, sir.
Fine. Okay. Can we go on to the next slide, please? All right. So that is the outline for the next lecture. Next. So in Malaysia, right? So it is bounded by legal provisions. So those are the provisions as I stated in my slide. Okay. Next. So the provisions are instruments applied to procurement at the federal, state, and related government agencies and not specifically applicable to defense procurements. So all officials can come under the Government Procurement Management Division, Ministry of Finance. So whether you like it or not, the money comes from the Ministry of Finance. So they are the guardians of those finances. Okay. So the legal provisions are not only at the federal. Federal means the government. State is the states in the country, and then right up to the lower levels, right? So it applies for all government agencies. Next slide, please. So we have the tenders boards, which is appointed by the Ministry of Finance. And then we have the defense procurement by the Ministry of Defense, which comes under the purview under this legal framework. So in the Ministry of Defense, the procurement, defense procurement, it follows all the legal requirement that is needed. Next slide, please. Right. So transparency in defense expenditure and procurements. So it's all about the Official Secret Acts. So when it comes to defense equipment, it's about secrecy. So it is very difficult for countries to actually make public knowledge of whatever their defense acquisition are, except when discussed in Parliament, but to an extent. So all the other sensitive issues regarding defense acquisition are done separately. Yeah? So I think it's similar for other countries as well. So there's a need, there's a challenge actually to acquire the information on defense acquisitions of a country because of defense and security secrets and national interest. Next slide, please. So the processes, right, involve, as I mentioned just now, the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Defense, the Attorney General Department. So the Attorney General Department looks at the legal aspects of all these purchases that is to be made. And then we have the Science and Technology Research Institute for Defense, which is an agency that do R&D for defense, right? So they look at the acquisitions to be made, whether it conforms to the quality and also to other matters that relate to the requirements of defense. Next slide, please. So contract which is less than 7 million lies with the Secretary General of Ministry of Defense, right? If more than 7 million, then it goes back to the Ministry of Finance or the Prime Minister Department or the Ministry Defense Procurement Committee. Okay, so it needs, for more than 7 million, it needs to be approved by the Ministry of Defense. Right. Next slide, please. So the processes are, you have the defense process internal control, where you have the technical and price negotiation committees, both military and defense civilian staff. So the defense civilian staff, right, acquire the specifications needed by the military and they discuss it. And what are the equipment that is being proposed by the private companies, right? And so on. So they look into it. So for transparency purposes. And then you have the external control, where you have the Ministry of Finance, right? And all right, Milia Shafira, hang on. Okay, the Attorney General's Department. Okay, next slide, please. So the stages are that obviously you have the annual budget, which is presented in and approved in Parliament, and then you have the budget allocation for the item to be procured, and then the technical specifications preparation, and finally the evaluation and determination of the tenders for that equipment. Next slide, please. Right. So this is the tenders, right? For those tenders of more than 200,000 is called an open tender. And then from 50,000, 200,000, you have closed tenders. And then you have also direct negotiation with the supplier, which is the approval by the Ministry of Finance. Okay. So like big acquisitions like submarines, warplane, you name it, missiles and so on, those are under the Ministry of Finance. Next slide, please. So the notice of tenders will be done through local and foreign media and also through the Malaysian government central procurement website. So they have an area where it is made known, right? The tenders are made known to people who are interested. And then once the decision is being made, right, you have the letter of intent to the successful bidder, and then the letter of acceptance once the offer is already accepted. Next slide, please. So test evaluation and determinations, right? A tender opening committee, officials from MINDEF and MOF will open each tender and record relevant details in the register. And then the technical evaluations of the bid, right? And another committee evaluating the financial details of the bid. Okay, obviously the companies that submit the tender must be financially viable, right? So in order for them to be successful in the tender. And then those committees are not given the details of the bidders to ensure fairness. And then any disagreement of the approval of defense is referred to the cabinet, right? So, and then large procurements are mandatory cabinet endorsement. So the big buys, the big acquisitions are made through cabinet endorsement. Cabinet is the government, okay? So it's presented in the cabinet for their approval. Next slide, please. So this is the schematic diagram, right? For easy understanding, okay? So from the executive for the project and program right up to the MOF approval or the Ministry of Defense Secretary General where applicable. Okay, so for those tenders which is approved by the Secretary General is less than 7 million, and more than 7 million will be by the final approval of the Ministry of Finance. And then obviously in the tender board, you have the technical and the financial committee. Next slide, please. So Malaysia Defence Procurement Settlement is the defence white paper. So as mentioned earlier, it was approved in Parliament in December 2019. And then it provides the country's public with the country's security issues and the Malaysian Armed Forces long-term development plans generally, not specifically. So it improves the transparency of defence acquisition and equipment. Procurements. Next slide, please. And then you have the audits. Okay, I will not dwell on that one. So you have the internal audit in the Ministry of Defence to ensure that all purchases made are according to the legal framework as mentioned earlier, right? And also any mistakes and deficiencies. Next slide, please. Okay, we have the external audit. So this is at the federal level, and it's a statutory organization under the Auditor General, and it's not answerable to the government, so it is independent, right? And then the annual report is presented to Parliament to look at any deficiencies in any of the purchases made by all government agencies, including Ministry of Defence and the Armed Forces. Next slide, please. So again, I've mentioned, so the responsibility of the external audit right? Next slide, please. So defense research and development. So these are the other issues. So in Malaysia, we have an organization that is committed to research and development for defense, which was founded in 1968. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, the defense industry development, right? So as I mentioned earlier, to be self-reliant, but not in every sense of it. So the focus in Malaysia is automotive and aerospace, right? And then you have joint ventures, public, private sectors, right? The Syarikat Malaysia Explosive and the Lumut Naval Dockyard, and also offsets in technology transfer and training. Okay, next. So to conclude, no conclusion. All right, I must have left something. All right, so let's look at the questions posed. Right, Adi Nugroho. So
Excuse me, sir.
yeah.
Do you want to answer the question directly, or maybe for more interactive with the students? The student, if you allow it, the student will
I think
explain
because
the question.
of the audio
Oh,
chat,
okay.
right?
I see.
So let
I
me
see.
go through the chat, right? When
Sir.
I look at the chat, I just answer the question from the chat.
Right, sir. I
Okay.
just want to remember this. Remind the student, if you have a question, please write down your question in the
chat.
Yeah, in the chat box. Thank you.
Okay, right on there.
Yes,
So the
please
first one is
proceed, sir.
from Adi Nugroho. So Malaysia have internal and the independent auditor to ensure that the procurement of defense equipment is carried out properly and can be accounted for. So his question is, how far can the independent auditor supervise the procurement of defense equipment carried out by the Ministry of Defense? Now, when it is audited, right, the purchases, the tender process, the acquisition has been done. All right. So they look at the what you call this, the processes, the documents which the acquisition was made, and then they look on the ground, right, whether it is what it is stated in the agreement is what happens on the ground. So they look at any deficiencies in the legal framework, firstly. So does it follow the legal framework? Is it more than 7 million or is it less than 7 million? So the documents of tender, so one is the letter of intent, and then the letter of acceptance, and finally the actual contract, and also the acquisition of the equipment itself, and so the training of personnel, and then the maintenance and so on. So they look back at what has been done. Okay, so if there's any deficiencies, right, from the perspective of the acquisition of those assets, then it will report, right, in the annual report. It is not involved directly, right, in the acquisition of the equipment. So that's why it is independent. Okay, so that they prepare the audit report. From the audit report, they look at the evidence that is provided by the documents in the acquisition of those assets, right? And then they will put out their report, right? If there's any deficiencies or any other challenges, right, that needs to be rectified in the process of that acquisition. Okay, so the thing has passed. So it means that it is independent, right? It is then after things have been acquired. Okay. Now the other is from Milia Shafira. Okay. So having a strong defense is a basic need for every nation. Defense capability is not only important in maintaining the safety of the nation, but a symbol of strength and a means to achieve national interests. All right. Then to achieve this goal, we need defense equipment. Defense equipment. Hang on. Okay. Can be done by buying imports, right, through the defense industry, self-reliance. All right. I want to know your opinion in the procurement of defense equipment in Malaysia. Is it better to buy or manufacture by relying on the domestic defense industry? Very good question. Now, like I said, Malaysia, our capabilities are not as that of developed nations like China or the US, right? Where what we call this, they're able to, they have their own defense industrial complex, which is capable of doing research and experimenting, and then at the same develop new weapon systems for the future war. So Malaysia do not have that capability. Now, like I mentioned just now, we have our defense white paper, which was published in early 2020 when it was discussed in Parliament in December 2019. So what we do is that we look at the defense white paper and look at what are the equipment that we need to acquire to ensure the sovereignty and integrity of Malaysia in this very challenging geostrategic security environment. So we look, firstly, obviously, we look at our defense industry. Are they capable of doing it? No. Right? So we look at what are they capable of. So one example is Malaysia's new class of offshore patrol vessel, right? So it was with the naval boosted industry in some industry, naval boosted industry, in a joint venture with a Chinese defense contractor. So two of the ships was built in China. So the balance is to be built by Borstit, by the Borstit Naval Dockyard. All right. So, and the equipment, right, is bought from the Western countries and put inside the ship. So, like I said, Malaysia is not a country that is capable of producing all the equipment needed for its defense. Some of it needs to be imported from other defense companies, international defense companies. So I hope that answers your questions. So I see there's only two. Is there any more questions?
From students, is there any more questions? If you haven't, write it down in the chat box. Maybe you can just address it directly to the speaker right now.
Excuse me, I have one question, Mister.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yes, Mr. Tri, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. My name is Mr. Tri, student Defense Management, Republik Indonesia National Defense University. Very interesting about your presentation today. I'm interested with about interoperability system in 3 services of Malaysia. My question: how to build the interoperability system in the Army, Navy, and Air Force, so the 3 services in good coordination, good collaboration, and good control operation. Is that my question?
Oh, fine. Very simple. Way back in 2006, 2007, we established the Joint Force Headquarters. So it is the Joint Force Headquarters' responsibility to ensure the interoperability of all these defense equipment between the three services. And he has done that. So any acquisition that is being made, right, either by the Army or the Navy or the Air Force, is jointly coordinated for interoperability by the Joint Force Headquarters. Okay, I think that's all I can answer because, like I said, defense and security matters are very, very sensitive. So I cannot indulge too much. I hope you can understand that. Okay, so I hope that answers your questions. Now let's go
Maybe
to
any feedback from Mr. Tri? Okay, no, maybe we go to next question, sir.
Okay, we go to
From
the
chat
chat
box.
box.
Excuse me?
Bayu Ageta. All right. So
Yes, sir.
she said that how does the Malaysian government determine the budget allocated in the procurement process for the main equipment of the defense system? Okay, I think I understand what you mean. All right. So I mean every nation, even the United States, right, before they acquire any equipment, they need to pass through Parliament or in the United States Congress or the Senate as well, right? So in Malaysia, it's the Parliament, both the Dewan Rakyat and the Senate, Dewan Senate. So when it is approved, right? So what they did was very, say for example, the government is going to present the new budget of 2022 in October, November this year. But the work has been done, right, very early, in fact, late last year and early this year, for all the government departments and relevant agencies to come up with a budget. Looking at, obviously, first at the economic viability of the country, right? It's predicted for this year, for next year. So looking at the pandemic situation and so on, so it is accounted for. So they say that the economic growth for Malaysia for 2022 could be 6%. So 6% of economic expansion for Malaysia next year could amount to, say, 300 million ringgit. 300 billion ringgit. Okay. So from that 300 billion ringgit, the apportionment of security and defense is determined. So how is that determined? Now, we look back at the defense white paper that was established in early 2020 and was discussed in Parliament in 2019. So they look at their document, and from there they assess the requirement of the defense budget. Okay, so that is how it is determined because it is already in the budget, right? There is already details, right, of the major procurements that is needed by the Malaysian Armed Forces, including new, what you call these technologies, new equipment, new platforms that it require to ensure the sovereignty and integrity of this country, and also to replace all this antiquated equipment that Malaysia has. It's how it is determined. Okay, so in the budget itself, it is already identified how much, all right, is the budget to procure the equipment, including the maintenance and sustainability of current assets that it has. Okay, so very good question. All right. Now, let's see. So
Excuse me?
hang on, we have another one from Ambodo, right? Tri Ambodo.
Yes, sir.
So there are two questions. How does Malaysia build the interoperability system? I think I mentioned that just now, right? Good communication, coordination, and control. Well, we have the Joint Force Headquarters. And the other one is the offset TOT and SR are easy to say, but not easy to be done. How is the implementation of offsets or TOT in every defense material acquisitions can improve Malaysian human resource capability? Please explain. All right. I did a research on the developments of the Malaysian defense industry. Very good question as well. Like I said, it's not easy. Okay, so Malaysia is not a country like the US or China that has its own defense industrial complex. So we just have a small defense industry which is still developing. So like I mentioned earlier, we are more concerned about the automotive and aerospace industry, and also in part the naval industry as well for the Navy. So as such, we focus on that one. And during the acquisition of those assets, right? So part of the agreement is to offset or transfer of technology. And also in part, sometimes at one time when we had a major acquisition, we trade our natural resources, for example, the use of palm oil and other raw materials that Malaysia can provide, okay, because it is there. So instead of paying in cash, right? So we use products which have value to be included, right, in the contract, right? So it is very viable. And how far the extent of interoperability, right, and the skills that set. So every new what you call this platform that is acquired, right? So there is a cooperation between the international company and the local company to develop the human resource skills needed for that new acquisition, new technology. So that's how the defense industry is developed. Okay. So the other question that you mentioned just now was that the offset, acquisition, and improve the human resource capability. That's how it is done. Okay, that's how it is done. So it is in the contract. It is said. So part of the contract is the training of the human resource required for that new equipment. That's how we develop it, and we have the our science research and development agencies, right, are also involved in the acquisition of this asset. So they look at parts which are relevant to the Ministry of Defense and particularly for the Malaysian Armed Forces, looking at their experiences previously. So that's how the collaboration of not just government to government maybe, but also between the Malaysian Armed Forces and the primary contractors of that equipment, but also other government agencies which is relevant in the development of the Malaysian defense industry. Okay, right. Good question. So next question is from Nora Risalina. Okay. Nora Risalina. Okay. The question is, explain how the Malaysian government policy in procuring defense for the needs of the national defense system, because that you said before the Malaysian can't produce their own, and said decided to procure more domestic products or foreign products. Okay. All right, like I said just now, okay, Malaysia is not a developed country, right? And developed in the sense that we have our own defense industrial complex, just like China, just like Russia, just like United Kingdom, just like the US of A. We are just very small. So we look at our capability, capacity, right? The knowledge, the technical knowledge that we have acquired, and then the R&D, the collaboration with the research with the Defense University and other universities with regards to the development of the defense industry. So obviously, right, advanced weapon systems, right, we do not have that capability. So as such, we acquire it from international defense companies that have that equipment or defense weapons platforms that Malaysia needs. But those which we are capable of producing our own, for example, the Syarikat Malaysia Explosives, we produce our own bullets, right, and other equipment as well, right? And then the automotive industry, defense industry. So they work together with the international defense company and produce the vehicle shell in Malaysia. right? So part of it is done at the original manufacturer country, right? So some of it are being done at the in country in Malaysia. The transfer of technology, so the training of the human resource requirement and so on, and the skills and so on. That's how it is done. So I do not know how Indonesia does that. All right. So Herda, do we still have time for my lecture?
There's plenty of time, sir, actually.
So how much time do I have?
You still have about 40 minutes for session and answer.
Fine, good.
Question, sir.
Right.
If
Any
there's
more
any question
questions?
from student, please, you may ask the speaker directly, or you can write down
In the chat box.
in the
Yeah.
chat box.
Type in the chat box, not a problem. Now, if any of the question posed already, you are not satisfied with my answer, please provide another question for me to make it much more clearer for you. Okay, but please understand, I'm a serving officer in the Malaysian Armed Forces. So as such that I cannot provide specific answers to your questions. I have to do it in a general manner. Okay?
Yes, sir.
All right.
So there's a question from Mr. Adi, sir. Maybe Mr. Adi, you want to deliver your question directly, please? Oh, Miss Riri. Please, Riri.
Excuse me?
Yes, please, Miss Riri, deliver your question.
Okay. Good morning, sir. My
Morning.
name is Riri Andani. Okay. Has Malaysian acquisition strategy been appropriately tailored to recruit capabilities, technology, funding, risk profile, and need that, as well as staff capabilities and experience? How the government and defense prepare for this? Thank you, sir.
Can you repeat the question again, please?
Okay.
Hang on. Can you type it down for me? So it's much easier for me to understand your question. Can you do that for me? Can you type it down in the chat box?
Yes.
Sir, it's already in the chat box, sir. From a question from Riandani.
Okay, all right. So Adi Nugroho. So Rini Andani. Okay, as Malaysia acquisition strategy been appropriated to required capabilities, technology, funding, risk profile, and need date, as well as staff capabilities and experience? How the government and defense prepare for this? Is actually the answer is very simple. Now, before we acquire any defense equipment, right, new defense equipment, we look at the specifications. What the Malaysian Armed Forces does is that they send their officers, right, to look into the respective capability of weapons, right? They examine first, look at the specification, looks at the operational capability, whether it suits what the Malaysian Armed Forces requires. Okay, so as such that they look also, besides at the specification, what is the gap of technological knowledge and experience that Malaysia has with the new equipment. So how does that gap of human resource that needs to be trained, right, to ensure that we have sufficient human resource with the necessary knowledge and skills for that new technology? Okay, so it is all part of the strategy, if you want to say, but it is already stated, right? So we have what we call military doctrine. So in military doctrine, it is stated that the acquisitions of assets that we have, right, must be look at many factors. So like I said, one is interoperability, one is how does the weapon platform will function in the future war, how does it relate in the environment of a battle space, right, in coordination with the Navy and also with the Air Force and all these other technologies in the future war battle space. So I say it's not easy. It's not easy. So it needs to be, it takes time, right? So the examination of each of these weapon platforms is examined very, very in detail by the experts, not only from the Malaysian Armed Forces, but also from our R&D organizations, right? And also involving the civilians, right, in the Ministry of Defense to ensure that whatever is being conducted, right, is within the legal framework that I mentioned earlier. Okay, so it means transparency. And it means also how do we actually, when we acquire this asset, it can also further develop Malaysia's defense industry by having new players, right? And developing new vendors and so on, okay? And expanding the industry, okay? Right. So that's the, okay, so risk profile and so on. So like I said, the funding is all in the budget, right? We have the defense budget, the yearly defense budget is all there, okay? So the risk profile is actually by looking at the weapon platform. What weapons do we need? There are so many. So which one is suitable to our environment, to our geostrategic environment, right? When I say environment, is that Malaysia is a country where it is wet and dry. Can the weapon platform functions effectively in this sort of weather, or is just like it's more operational in temperate weather? So those are the things, specifications that we look into. But obviously we go back to doctrine. How do we prepare, say, for example, the Malaysian Army for the future war? So it's already in our military doctrine. So how do we develop it? So once we have that, how does it relate to our defense budget for the next 5 years, right? From 2021 to 2025. So what is there, right? The experts in the Malaysian Armed Forces that we have, right? So how do we do that? So that's how teams are being sent. So every time when we acquire new assets, there is a team of experts, military personnel in their respective fields, and before the acquisition of the assets, looking at the different, what you call these products, similar products, and choose the best one for the Malaysian Armed Forces. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Okay, so just now, your question just now, please.
Thank you,
Any
sir.
other question from students?
Just now, did she type it down in the chat box?
Can I question one more?
Yes, Mr. Kri, please.
Okay, thank you. Maybe one question again, Mr. I interested about your maintenance, repair, and overhaul. You have any material from the overseas, maybe like Scorpion, maybe like Sukhoi? What about the contribution about your local industry to contribute in the maintenance, repair, and overhaul program? So as we know, the budget is very big to use or spend in the maintenance, repair, and overhaul program. Thank you.
All right, good question. So in the contract, right, you have two parts. One part is the acquisition of the asset. So I give you an example, right? So the Malaysia's acquisition of the Scorpion submarine from France, right? So it took over five years, if I'm not mistaken, okay, from the moment the contract was signed until the submarine becomes operational. So when it becomes operational, there is another contract, right? In fact, within the initial contract, right, they have already provided a what you call this a technology transfer, right? So they have built the facilities for the submarine and developing the human resource to maintain and sustain the submarines. So maintenance, repair, and overhaul, right? So besides that, the original manufacturer is also represented in the MRO. Okay, MRO is maintenance, repair, and overhaul. Okay, so they have another contract, which is not contract. It's provided in the defense that once the acquisition is operationalized, then there is an allocation of the budget throughout its life cycle. If the life cycle is 20 years for the submarine, then there is a budget for every year for its MRO. So it is already there. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yes, yes, I know. Yes.
Yes. So that means now, with the new capability, we are also developing our defense industry, right? How to maintain and sustain the submarines. So we have acquired that technology, but however, the spare parts, the major spare parts, are still being provided by France, by the manufacturer. Okay, and the maintenance and sustenance of the submarine is still also from the original manufacturer, because the submarine, the design of it is not a copyright trademark for Malaysia. It's still their copyright. It's part of their copyright. Right? We cannot infringe on their copyright. We only buy the equipment to sustain it. So those are the challenges of Malaysia defense industry. But to me, the important thing is that they do it within their capacity. Okay, how to develop further the Malaysian defense industry. That's how they do it. Okay, right. So we have another question on the chat box. Hang on. Right, this one is
yes, it's from Miss Arum, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, welcome. Okay, Miss Arum. All right. Program Office and Contracting Officer considered the need for government rights to data, and how will they be expressed in the RFP? If there is potential for contractor to have proprietary rights to its application, does the acquisition strategy and the resulting RFP include the necessary requirements and non-disclosure agreements so that the government and its support contractors can have the needed access to the data generated by these applicants? Very good question. Now that is very technical. I will try and answer to the best of my ability. Okay. Now, the thing is that whatever, like I said, whatever equipment that we acquire from the original manufacturer, right, from overseas, okay, they have the copyright reserve of that weapon. They only sell it to us. Okay, so obviously, like I mentioned, there need to be a certain win-win situation. Right, so the transfer of technology, the development and training of personnel or human resource and so on. But not all the information are given to us because they need to safeguard it, because they do not want their competitor to know, right, the technical information of the weapon system. Okay, so like I said, it is a very challenging situation, but more important thing is the collaboration between the parties involved, right? So that the equipment that is acquired can be operationalized, right, in the Malaysian Armed Forces according to its requirements. Okay, So non-disclosure agreements is, like I said, is like saying that you cannot say this, you cannot say that. Is like I said, it is in the military, whether you like it or not, we are in defense and security. So a lot of the information cannot be divulged in the openly. Sometimes it needs to be carefully given out, okay, so that it does not to protect the defense interest, right? The defense people in its operation, the conduct of its operations. Okay, so I hope you can understand that. Now, data generated. Obviously, data is generated from the moment that the equipment was introduced for purchase. Okay, if you don't have data representation, how does the Malaysian Armed Forces personnel is able to evaluate that equipment or that defense platform, right? For whether does it comply with the specifications that the Malaysian Armed Forces needs. So obviously, right, the very technical aspect, say for example, the material used in the development of that defense platform, right? And how it is designed, and also from the production of it. But those are all trade secrets, okay? So those information, those data are not given to us. What we are concerned is the performance, the operational capability of that defense equipment, how to maintain it, how to sustain it within its life cycle. And then obviously, we need to also prepare for its replacement. Okay, so every weapon system or defense equipment, we have the life cycle and also the plan on how and when we should replace it. In fact, before that point arrives, right, the Malaysian Armed Forces, we have already staff, the experts who are experienced in their respective fields, right, looking at the weapon platforms available, not only off the shelf, but also within the Malaysian defense industry. Okay, whether the Malaysian defense industry is capable of producing, or they have produced that equipment and they've exported it overseas, right? And whether it is applicable to the specifications that we require. And in most cases, we do. And that's what we did. But obviously, it is still within the defense industry, right? It's not as big like having a a jet, right, that is capable of overcoming the F-35. We don't have that. So like I said, what we do is within our own capacity and capability. Okay, good question. So next question is, right, from Uli Nesti Pratiwi. Okay, supply chain risk management, including performance of all source intelligence, threat assessment for suppliers of all critical components. I think I've already explained that, right? So the critical components, right, is those components which ensure the operational ability of that defense platform, okay, that was acquired. But how it is produced, right, the Malaysian Armed Forces doesn't want to know. We only want to know, right, this is the equipment. Let's say now we have these long-range missiles, land-to-land missiles. It's just like an artillery capability, but using missiles instead of an artillery gun. Okay, so the specification of the rockets, right? The critical components of the rockets, right? Is it capable of operationalizing in wet and dry weather? Or is it just capable in temperate temperatures, temperate weather? So those are the things that we need to test and look into. That's why prior to the acquisition of the asset, right, our team is brought out to see how they perform, right, practically this asset to show that it is able to function in the Malaysian weather environment, wet and dry, right? The movement of the vehicles, right, during the rainy season. So in the jungles of Malaysia, so it's quite impossible because the jungle is very dense. So what about in plantations? So yes, we have the land roads and so on, but we have also the normal roads, right? So these weapons platforms are able to move quite quickly in those environments, which is obviously there are limitations, and then there are also other areas of performance that we can accept. So actually, the experts, if he is an artillery officer, so he has the experience, he has the skill and so on. So he will advise the commander, and then the commander will advise whoever next, the superiors, particularly the Defense Secretary General and the Minister of Defense, and probably even the cabinet, right? If it's more than 7 million in equipment, on how this weapon is suitable for acquisition and so on. All right. So I hope that answers your question. Okay. Any more question, please?
Any question from student, maybe lecturer?
Okay. You mentioned about supply chain risk management. Now, I can understand that. Now, whether you like it or not, the military technology that we have now requires the use of rare materials, rare products, right? And these rare materials, right, the country that produce it in great numbers is China. And one time it was the United States, but no longer, right? So China has the capacity to produce the rare materials, which is applicable in many, many products, particularly in military and scientific equipment, right? For example, the use of their space agency, right? They use them in space, in the lunar, and then the Mars and exploration and so on. Not only in space, but also the military. So the problem because of the pandemic, right? A lot of the production is being closed down, but not in China. It's still producing. Okay, so if you look at the situation in China now, China is one of the countries that is still able to function. Why? Because they're able to control the pandemic COVID-19. That's why the economy is spending. Right? And you can see that other countries of the world are suffering because of lockdowns and so on, even in Malaysia. Okay, but we still open up some sectors to ensure the survival of the country. We don't do trade. How are we going to provide the revenue or income for the government? Okay, so those are the things that affect the supply chain. So, and a good example, one car manufacturer had to close down for 2 days because why? They don't have the chips that produce the cars. Because cars now, right, is all electronic. So they use chips. But chips is in short supply because of these supply chain problems, right? So many of the factories that are related to this development of the car industry, right, is shut down because of the pandemic. So we need to understand the environment and how do we overcome it. So they need to look at other companies that produce it. Again, not many. Okay, so demand is great, but supply is not there. So those are the risks in the supply chain that need to be faced by the manufacturers. But as far as the acquisition of defense equipment, Malaysia do not take that into account. The problem is with the manufacturer. As far as we are concerned, when we do the discussion with the manufacturer, and we are agreeable that the equipment needs to be operationalized after a certain year, that means it's prepared and ready to be given to us, right? So that it can be operationalized within the contract terms that is agreeable between the parties. Okay, so on that part, the supply chain risk is left with the manufacturer, not with the Malaysian Armed Forces or the government of Malaysia. Okay.
Sir, there's another question from the students, from Ms.
Okay.
Olvira. In the
All
chat
right.
box, sir.
So she said here that does the acquisition strategy address supply? Okay, this one has been answered, right? The other one is acquisition equipment, whether special capacity of its human resource is needed, and if needed, what kind of capacity is that? Now, good question. To me, it's very simple. The capacity depends on what type of defense equipment are you purchasing or are you acquiring. If it's from the Navy, right, obviously you have the Navy Wallas or the Navy personnel who are experts in that field to acquire it. If it's from the Army, if the Army is related to the Army, right, then the Army will have to do it. And similarly with the Air Force. But now, because of the future war, right, there's no longer a single service perspective. It needs to be joined. Like I mentioned earlier about interoperability. So teams are now included, not say, for example, from the Army, if it is specifically for the Army, but it has relation with the Navy and the Air Force, then in that team, they will have members from the Navy and the Air Force to provide advice and ensure that the equipment is interoperable. So it can be led by the service. It can also be led by the Joint Force headquarters. So we have the means to do that. So like I said, times are changing. Technology is changing. Preferences is changing. And the geostrategic environment is very dynamic. It's changing all the time. So what is the challenge then to overcome all that? Not easy. So what we can do is to the best of our ability. So those are some of the means that we take into account when acquiring future defense acquisitions. So we look back at our previous experiences on how to further improve the quality, right, of purchasing defense equipment for the future defense requirement of this country, right? So obviously, if we do not look at just at the equipment, we also look at the human resource equipment. We also look at the development, where possible, for the defense industry in the acquisition of that equipment. And also, if there is any local defense industry that has developed their own equipment, we need to have a look at it and to see whether it is acceptable to the Malaysian Armed Forces in its operational requirement, then we acquire it from them instead from overseas. So that's some of the decisions that are being made at the Ministry of Defense. Now, within the Ministry of Defense, we have a committee that ensures the development, the continued development of the Malaysian defense industry. Okay, so I hope in part that answers your question when it comes to capacity. Okay, so the capacity depends on the acquisition of the asset that we make. But take note, right? Whether you like it or not, the future war is going to be a combination of the Navy, Air Force, and also the Army. But if we look at the developed countries now, they don't only have the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy, but they also now have the Space Force. Because the space is another warfare frontier for the future war. So whoever controls space can now look at other countries, right? So if you are under the ground in a tunnel, they can even detect you. So in the future war is going to be very complex, highly technological, right? And for countries like Malaysia, it's about survivability. How do we survive in that sort of environment? So we need to be clever in doing that. That's why Malaysia stresses on diplomacy. Okay, so we talk, then we come to a win-win situation, not only with the major powers of the world, but also countries in the region. Okay. Right. Any more question, please? All right.
One more question, sir.
All right. Again, about transparency in defense procurement. Okay, based on Malaysia, there are the Official Act and its amendments to be adhered by government officials on classified information. Okay, in Indonesia, we have problems in keeping the acquisition transparent because Indonesian people are very enthusiastic in paying attention to the entry and exit of government budget. So, bagaimana pemerintah Malaysia membatasi campur tangan masyarakat untuk mengetahui informasi rahsia dalam defense procurement? Thank you, sir. Very good question. Now, like I said, the early years of the formation of Malaysia, we were fighting the communist insurgents, right? So the focus was how to overcome that threat, and we did it very successfully. So a lot of the information, right, with regards to defense, was not passed on to the people. So whatever we acquire, we just acquired for the purpose of defeating the communist insurgency. But after the end of the communist insurgency, beginning of the 1990s, the modernization of the Malaysian armed forces, that's when we start to develop and modernize the Malaysian armed forces. However, we do not have a defense white paper, but we have a national defense policy. So we follow that. So it is not a public document, so the public do not know about it. But it is, you must understand that despite that, right, the people are represented in parliament. So all these acquisitions, like I mentioned, it is presented to the cabinet. And also when it presented to the cabinet, it must also get the feedback from the, what you call this, the backbenchers or the opponents, right? Now, who are not in government, but they are at the parliament to criticize or to see the transparency and so on. But again, despite all the efforts, right, we still have cases of what you call this corruption. Okay, so I think Najib is a good case. All right, so billions of dollars was mentioned in many articles. So I cannot say anything about it. Okay, but how far that is true is up to the court to decide, and it's still in the process. But like I said, despite all the efforts, right, being done, okay, is looking back at our experiences. So in 2019, with the new government, to ensure transparency so that the public understand and knows what is happening with the security and defense needs of Malaysia, for the first time, we have a defense white paper. So it is discussed publicly in parliament, right? And it's also, the people can buy a copy of it. And they can go through the general information that is available in that budget book, right? So the people now understand, right? Why do we purchase such equipment? Why do we need it? As compared to previously. So times have changed. Things have changed. So it is becoming more transparent. And we want that so that there will be less corruption and the increase in efficiency and quality of purchasing defense equipment. Now, recently, the finance minister said by 2022, next year, right, they're going to be payments going to make only electronically online, electronically. So no more cash. So that means, right, so there is a continuous effort by the government to ensure that the experiences that we have, the bad side that we have previously, is improved in the future so that there is value for money on public funds, which is the budget. Okay? So I think it is a challenge, not just for Malaysia, but also for other countries. Okay? So again, what I can say is that for Malaysia, I cannot say for Indonesia. What I can say for Malaysia is that things are changing, right? These cultures, right, needs to be changed. So the defense white paper provided that avenue. So I pray that later on, right, when obviously, right, the defense white paper will be reviewed over time, and new information, new policies will be upgraded to look at the requirement of the future of this country. Okay, but you must understand that the defense white paper is being made by humans, so it's not perfect. So there are rooms for improvements. So like anything that we do, right, there are always room for improvement. Okay, so I hope that answers your questions. Okay, now we have another question by Muhammad Darish. Okay, sometime as a procurement chief and the team must produce the honor estimate of price. Please explain based on your experience in order to achieve the procurement process which is clean and transparent. Frankly speaking, okay, I do not have any experience with procurement. But I am a person, right? I was a director that overlook all the purchases made by the Malaysian Armed Forces, and through my superior, we report directly to the Chief of Defence Force. So I monitor all these defence purchases being made. I was the Director of Strategic Management. So reporting on all the defence financing through my general, my superior, to the Chief of Defence Force, and sometimes to the Chiefs of Navy, Air Force, and the Army, including the Chief of Defence Force, where and when applicable. So from that experience, right, in most cases, what we did is we really actually conform to the legal requirement, right? So at the same time, right, we also ensure that whatever was planned from the previous year in the budget, right, is spent according to plan. Okay, so to answer your question just now, right, you say that how to make that this secrecy, right, be made to the knowledge of the people. It's not easy. It's very challenging. Now, the reason why we have the Official Secret Acts is that to ensure that any classified information is not passed down, made public, because it can be a threat to national security. Okay, so what does that mean? It means the lives of the people of Malaysia. Yes, people may use or manipulate the term official security secrets act or secrecy, right? But as far as I'm concerned, right, what we do it professionally. We must do the best of our ability. From my experience, that whatever money that was allocated by the public was spent according to what was planned in the defense budget. Obviously, there are times we need to change it because circumstances change. Say, for example, in the operational expenditure, right, we have an unplanned visit from our friends, right? Let's say from one of the Asian countries, but it was not prepared in the budget because it was planned last year. So what do we do about it? So we look back at our budget, which we have prioritized. Where can we find the funds, right, to allocate for this visit? Okay, obviously you need the vehicles, you need the hotels, you need the food, and so on. Now that comes with the delegation. So we propose back some changes, minor changes to the budget for that allocation, and we go to the Secretary General. So any expenditure below 7 million, we only need the approval of the Ministry of Defense Secretary General. And it is within the legal framework provided by the government and by the country. Okay, so that's how we adjust any changes. So we just don't do it for the sake of doing it. So there are certain processes and procedures that we need to follow within the legal framework. So back to the secrecy, right? Information that is given out, we have a spokesperson for the Ministry of, for the Malaysian Armed Forces and also for the Ministry of Defense. So whatever is provided to the press, to the public, right, is provided in a sense that it doesn't complicate the security and defense of the country. So that's all I can say. I think it's very similar with Indonesia, okay, and for any country for that matter. So they jealously guard the secrecy of their defense and also security. All right. Right. So next question is
from Mr. Sunarto, sir.
Right. So it's about the Muhammad Daris just now. Okay. He said about, hang on, the technical specification and also estimate price. Okay. Now, when the team is established to procure the equipment, right? So we have many bidders. So out of all the bidders, we choose probably 3, the best. Okay. From that 3, then the team is sent out to examine, right, the specifications and at the same time discuss the price in terms of payments and so on. Okay. So we have the financing experts from the finance department in the Ministry of Defense and also the Ministry of Finance, right? So they have the experience on how big acquisitions are being made, particularly for the Malaysian Armed Forces, right, for the Ministry of Defense. So how do they include it so that in such a way that the final say, right, or the final agreement, which is documented, right, is a win-win situation. You cannot just take everything for yourself. Obviously, the manufacturer also wants something back, right? So it's a win-win situation. So it also benefits the manufacturer who is about to sell the weapon platform. And at the same time, it's also good for the Malaysian Armed Forces and Ministry of Defense, for that matter, in the acquisition of that defense system. Okay, so the price has already been fixed. So let's say now one tender, one bidder say is 7 million, another say 8 million, another say 10 million, but they will have reasons why they have that. Okay, say for example, this 7 million is just the equipment and the training and the support. We don't have anything else. So the 8 million, okay, sir, we have, and it's not only the defense equipment, but we also provide training, not only for the personnel, but also for the not technology transfer, right? We establish a local company to also assist in the maintenance, right, and repair of this equipment. Okay, but to a certain extent, not everything. Okay, so some of the repairs and overhaul needs to be sent back to the original manufacturer. But the final one, the 10 million, says, okay, you purchase the asset, you provide the training, not only for the military personnel, but also for the vendors, the knowledge transfer, right, for the people, the defense industry, right? So collaboration with a defense company that is related to that acquisition, right? At the same time, right, providing specific maintenance, repair, and overhaul. So they build the infrastructure together, right? And they also assist in the maintenance, repair, and overhaul of those defense equipment. So in the end, right, it is up to the tender board to decide, not for me. My part is to ensure the specifications and so on is done properly. That part, right, is the boss of the tender board. And finally, it needs to get the approval of the Ministry of Finance and also the Cabinet. Okay, so the process is quite tedious. Like I said, whether earlier in my lecture, whether you like it or not, it is a bureaucratic process. So it involves many levels. You cannot run away from it. Why? Because all this is public money. So it needs to be accounted for, right? Best value for money. Okay, good. So next question is from Sunarto Randa. Okay. The development of defense equipment independently, we need acquisition institution to be able to develop the results of research and development that have been made by researchers. What is your opinion about this acquisition institution? Is it really needed at this time? Very good question. No. Independently. Now, like I said, to do things independently, you have to look first at your capacity or your capability. So like I said, Malaysia do not have the defense industrial complex. So we look at our own capability. What can we produce? What we can do, all right? With regards to the technology transfer, to the training, and so on, right? That benefit both parties, okay? From the original equipment manufacturer right up to the Ministry of Defense or the defense industry itself. Okay? And obviously the Malaysian government and the interests of the people. So it looks at the whole concept of that. Okay, so R&D. So it is done not only at universities. In the National Defense University of Malaysia, we also have faculties that researches in equipment that is suitable for the military. Okay, for example, the use of bamboo in the construction of equipment, buildings and so on. Okay, so it was applicable in circumstances such as the welfare of veterans. So the research in bamboo development for building as a building material, right, is much more economical to assist the government and also the Veterans Association in helping out those veterans who are in dire need of assistance, particularly those who have land, but they have a very, what you call it, old house that needs to be repaired, rebuilt, and so on. So that's how we assist. But on the bigger perspective, right, is the collaboration not only with the Ministry of Defense, but also STRIKE, the R&D department in the Ministry of Defense, and also with national defense universities and other universities that relate to that particular defense equipment. So again, such institution, right? Such institution depends on the country. So in Malaysia, right, it's relevant. But how relevant is it? How relevant is it? It is subject to debate. Like I said, we are all human beings. There's nothing perfect. Obviously, there will be some deficiencies, but obviously there will be some good things as well. You cannot run away from it. So it is about the continuation of improvements to be made in such areas. But certain areas, you cannot do anything about it because Malaysia do not have that capacity. A good example is highly technological defense equipment, like the F-35. We don't have that industrial complex to build such aircraft. So those are examples which I can give you. Right. So I hope that answers your questions. Right. Any more questions, please? So, Herda, how much time do we have?
I think that's all the question from the students, sir.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah, the question and answer session is over.
Oh, okay.
Now, maybe let me invite a representative of student to deliver a brief opinion or maybe summary related to today's presentation, sir.
Please.
Okay. Please, for Mr. Daris.
All right. Good day, sir. My name is Muhammad Daris, Defense Management Study Program student. Pleasure, sir. I would like to give a personal insight regarding our discussion this morning. So earlier, we learned about the reason behind defense acquisition based on defense white paper atau kertas putih pertahanan. Issues arise all the time, become more complex and uncertain. For example, the issue in Middle East instability, militarization in South China Sea, terrorism, non-traditional threat or human security, and environmental issue. I tried to be rational as a moderate military power nation in Southeast Asia countries. I think we need to be ready to face those threats the best we can with what equipment we have at the moment. For future development, we need to prioritize the acquisition due to limited budget. There are several principles in acquisition, such as relevancy, affordability, resilience, sustainability, and transparency. From the speaker explanation, I see more and more similarity between Malaysia and Indonesia. I think we face the same concerns, the same problems in acquisition, and thus we also have similar procedure of acquisition. So I think that's what I can summarize at this time. Thank you for the chance, moderator. Thank you for the moment, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Good summary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daris. And now we have come to the end of this morning session. Before I close the whole discussion session, I'll give a chance for Mr. Amiruddin to give a closing statement. Please, for Colonel Amiruddin bin Dato Sulaiman, you may have the floor.
Oh, thank you very much. So I just pray that whatever I have lectured this morning to you all has been a good imparting of knowledge and also my experiences. One of the reasons why I became a lecturer at this National Defense University was I find it is important for military personnel such as myself to impart the knowledge and experiences gained to the future generations. So it is, I am gladdened, right, to not only impart my knowledge and experiences to the students in the National Defense University of Malaysia, but also at the National Defense University of Indonesia, like yourself. So I look forward to the strengthening of this collaboration between these two prestigious universities and hopefully that whatever we have achieved at this time can be further improved in the future through visits, through further collaboration, not just lectures, but also in research, right, and development for that is of similar interest to both universities, particularly at my faculty. So please convey my heartiest appreciation to your vice chancellor or equivalent, right? And your head of department. I'm very sorry, I can't recall their names. And also the organizing committee for making this lecture a very successful one. And, and, and I'm very happy. I'm very happy and contented to have done this lecture. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity given to me today. Thank you. And lastly,
yes, sir.
any what you call these shortcomings on my part, please forgive me. So I'm, like I said, I'm just a human being. So hopefully you can forgive me for that if there's any. Okay. All right.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for the remarkable closing statement. Let's give a big round of applause for our lecturer today. So once again, I would like to give a big gratitude to our lecturer this morning, Mr. Ramaduddin, for the wonderful presentation and explanation. And also, I thank you for all enthusiastic participants for joining this session. I personally apologize for any mistakes. I sincerely hope that we're able to meet again in next time, maybe in person, in better time and better condition. That's all from me. Thank you for your attention. Have a good day.
Thank you very much, moderator, for guiding this session. Let's give a round of applause to the moderator. As a token of our appreciation for their time and valuable contribution for our speaker and moderator, I'd like to invite the Secretary of Faculty of Defense Management to kindly present a memento to Colonel Amaruddin bin Dato Sulaiman and Mr. Ketut Laksmi Herdayatama. The Secretary of Faculty of Defense Management, Kolonel Laut Dr. Insinyur Aris Sarjito ST MAP IPU CIQER to give the certificate virtually to the speaker and moderator. The committee will take a picture. Sorry, sir, your speaker, your mute, your speaker, sorry.
Yeah, I can't hear.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Aris. We cannot hear your voice, sir. It's already unmute, maybe the setting of the microphone, sir.
Okay, sorry. I think this is any problem. Okay, please wait again.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Aris. We still cannot hear your voice, sir.
Diambil alih aja.
Siap, Bapak. Terdengar, Pak.
Oke, pakai laptop saya. Okay, thank you for Mr. Colonel Amiruddin with incredible presentation. Now I to express our gratitude upon the speaker and moderator in this session. I'm Secretary of Defense Management Program Study on behalf on the Dean Faculty of Defense Management of the Republic of Indonesia, Defense University, will award certificate of appreciation to the speaker and moderator. May all the information delivered in this session be useful for all of us. The certificate is awarded to the speaker, Colonel Amiruddin bin Dato Sulaiman.
Thank you very much, Colonel Dr. IR Aris. Really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Let us give a round of applause to Colonel Amiruddin. The next is the second certificate awarded to the moderator, Hidayatma. Let us this certificate. Next certificate, please. For moderator.
Yes, thank you very much, sir.
Okay, give applause to moderator. That's all for this season. Thank you. And now I would like to read closing remarks from the Dean of the Defense Management Faculty in the Republic of Indonesia Defense University on the Overseas Study Program 2021. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. Best wishes for all us. Salam. Namo Buddhaya. Om Swastiastu. The Honorable Rector of the Republic of Indonesia Defense University, Vice Admiral Prof. Dr. Amarul Octavian, Naib Counselor of National Defense University of Malaysia, Lieutenant General Dato' Hasagaya bin Abdullah, Dean Faculty of Defense Studies and Management of National Defense University of Malaysia, Lieutenant Colonel Prof. Madya Arifin bin Ismail, Vice Dean of Defense Management Faculty of the Republic of Indonesia Defense University, Air Vice Marshal Anton Iman Santoso, all secretaries of study program and lecturers of Defense Management Faculty of the Republic of Indonesia Defense University, all lecturers and students of National Defense University of Malaysia, all students of Defense Management Faculty of the Republic of Indonesia Defense University, and all students all of Faculty of Defense Studies and Management, National Defense University of Malaysia, who are proud of. We praise the presence of God Almighty, because only by God's grace we are still given health and strength in the implementation of the overseas study program, starting from the opening to the closing of the Defense Management Faculty. Alhamdulillah, it has been 5 days of implementation of the overseas study program online, start from 21 to 25 June 2021. As the Dean of the Defense Management Faculty of the Republic of Indonesia Defense University, allow me to give an highest acknowledgement and thank you for the willing of the speaker, lecturer, and students that participated that participate in this activity. Thank you for your help, support, and cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, I suggest the students to immediately complete reports of the activities and research results and the final outcomes in the form of a journal. In addition, prepare for seminar of overseas study program activities result of the Defense Management Faculty Unhan RI. Hope the materials that have been obtained from the implementation of overseas study program can provide additional insight of knowledge and experience to students and implement to science that have been earned to conduct research in the field of defense management program, energy security program, and defense economic program. Thank you. This is my welcome. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam, Om Santi Santi Om. Nim Nama Budaya, Salam Kebajikan. Jakarta, June 2021. The Dean of Defense Management Faculty, the Republic of Defense University, Dr. Kasih Priantoro, SIMM MTR Han, Laksamana Muda Teknik. Thank you, sir. And good day for all. I appreciate for these activities who conduct with no. I think no problem, yeah. From start from now, conducting with make me happy because this can enrich our knowledge about Malaysian defense policy. Okay, thank you once again. Good day. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you to you too.
Thank you, MC. Time for yours.
Before closing session, please allow us to have a photo session for documentation of today's agenda. For all the participation, please turn on your camera. For all the participants, please post Salam Bela Negara to the camera. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Salam Bela Negara.
Salam bela negara.
Once more. 1, 2, 3. Salam Bela Negara. Once again, we would like to thank the speaker who have given knowledge and experience to all of us. May all knowledge we have gained be useful for us. The honorable participant, we have now come to the end of our session, the overseas study today. May I thank you very much for your participation. On behalf of the organizer, we would like to apologize for all mistakes during this session. Putih-putih bunga melati, harum wangi di pagi hari. Agenda hari ini cukup di sini, jika rindu harap hubungi. We would like also to remind all of us to implementing health protocol by washing your hand, wear your mask, and keep your distance. Let us to closing the session by saying hamdalah, alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Santi 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 Om. Nama budaya, salam kebajikan, salam bela negara.
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much once again.
Okay. Jumpa lagi.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Jumpa lagi.
Terima kasih juga pada semua partisipan. Selamat siang, selamat beristirahat.
Selamat siang.
Ya, selamat siang, Ibu Nora.
Selamat siang.
Ya, Bu Nora. Terima kasih, Bu.
Terima kasih, Bu.
Siang, iya hebat semua.
Terus terima kasih mentor pelaksanaannya.
Iya. Kenapa trouble laptop?
Laptopnya ternyata iya, bahwa saya bisa menerima